Today, we're going to take a look at 3 extremely common errors that are made when working with excavations. The first involves access. When we look at what depth a ladder or other type of safe access is required in excavations, most people state 4 feet deep. But this is a very common misunderstanding. Stairways, ladders, or ramps are required to be used whenever people are having to step up or down more than 19 inches. This misquoted 4-foot rule involves trenches. When people are in a trench over 4 feet deep, they have to be within 25 feet of a safe access point at all times. If employees are working throughout a long trench, ladders, stairs, or ramps can be placed every 50 feet so that no one is ever more than 25 feet from a proper exit. The second error involves benching of the excavation walls. When benching an excavation at a 1-to-1 ratio, going up 2 feet and over 2 feet repeatedly sounds and looks correct. In order to understand how to properly bench an excavation, let's first remember the proper sloping angles for various excavations. These slopes get measured from the toe of the excavation, where the wall starts at the bottom, to the hinge where it ends at the top. Type A soil has a maximum allowable slope of 3/4 to 1. Type B soil has a maximum allowable slope of 1 to 1, and Type C soil is 1.5 to 1. Let's look at some proper sloping of some 10-foot deep excavations in each type of soil. At 3/4 to 1, a 10-foot deep excavation in Type A soil has to have both walls set back 7.5 feet. 10-foot deep excavations in Type B soil require both walls to be set back 10 foot due to its 1-to-1 slope. And Type C soils get set back 15 feet on both walls at a 10-foot deep excavation because of its 1.5 to 1 slope. If these excavations were each 4 feet wide across the bottoms, they would be 19 feet, 24 feet, and 34 feet wide across the tops. When we bench an excavation, which isn't allowed in Type C soils, we are still required to maintain the same angles as the sloping requirements, and therefore they will still be just as wide across the tops as if we were sloping them. Also, it's important to remember that no benches can ever be taller than 4 feet. Now, if we go back to the benching that we showed at the beginning, and we apply those same rules of sloping, we'll see that this excavation isn't actually benched properly. This 10-foot deep excavation is only set back 8 feet. When we look at a proper 1-to-1 slope for Type B soil, it helps to see that the benches aren't correct. With the exception of the bottom bench, all the rest of the dirt has to be behind the slope angle. To do this correctly, the first bench has to be set back around twice as much as the rest. Done properly, this 10-foot deep excavation is now set back 10 feet on both sides, and when we look at the 1-to-1 angle, everything is behind the line. The type of soil and the depth of the excavation determine how each benching system will be done. With Type A soil and its 3/4 to 1 slope, there are a few different ways that you can accomplish it. Just keep in mind that the tallest bench allowed is 4 feet. Multiply how deep you are going by 0.75, and that's how far both walls have to be set back from their toe to their hinge. With the 1-to-1 slope in Type B soil, there are also a variety of ways that you can do it. However deep the excavation is, both walls need to be benched back that same dimension, still keeping all of your benches no taller than 4 feet. Type C soil has a 1.5 to 1 angle, so for every foot of depth, each wall has to be set back 1.5 feet. But as we said earlier, benching is not allowed in Type C soil. The third common error involves the placement of spoil piles. Everyone has heard that spoil piles have to be placed at least 2 feet from the edge of the excavation. But does that mean that if your pile is 2 feet away, it's okay? Not necessarily. First, always make sure that your spoil piles are no steeper than the allowable slope of the soil type to help prevent it from collapsing. You can see that this spoil pile is quite a bit steeper than the walls of this Type C excavation. That places all of this soil in a dangerous situation. In Type B soil, keep your spoils no steeper than the 1-to-1 slope. And 3/4 to 1 is the steepest that the spoils should be sloped in Type A soil. The other issue with the placement of spoil piles involves their weight. The height of the spoils adds a lot of extra weight, which superimposes a load on the walls of the excavations as it is dispersed down into the ground. A 12-foot tall spoil pile exerts several tons of extra pressure, and this extra stress can cause a dangerous cave-in. There are 2 ways that you can avoid this. One way is to keep the height of the spoils to 5 feet or less. This creates a lot less pressure down below it. The other method to reduce the stress on the excavation is to move the spoil pile farther away from the edge. To be effective for this method, the pile has to be away from the excavation at least half of its height. So this 12-foot tall spoil pile would need to be set back at least 6 feet instead of 2 feet to keep the forces low enough to not trigger a cave-in. Thank you for taking the time to learn a little more about how to protect yourselves and those around you when working in an excavation. Now that you know, put these practices into play and increase the safety on your work site.